You'd think after 15 years on the same piece of land, watching seasons roll through like slow postcards from God, hearing crickets and coyotes trade night shifts, sipping coffee on a porch built by my own hands, I'd have earned a little peace, right? I mean, I wasn't asking for much, just to finish out my years in a place where the only drama was whether the tomatoes would beat the deer this summer, or whether my old riding mower would start on the first try or cough like a smoker and demand sweet talk and starter fluid. But peace has this funny way of disappearing the second someone moves in who doesn't know what quiet feels like. Someone who sees land not as home, but as a battlefield for imagined control. Someone who wakes up not hoping for serenity, but hunting for power, even when no one offered them a crown. Her name was Betsy Langford, and the day she moved into the house next door, I swear the wind shifted, not in a poetic storms rolling in way, but in a oh no, chaos just unpacked way. Like the universe whispered, brace yourself, buddy. Now, before she arrived, life was simple. My wife, Martha, and I carved our routine into this soil like a love letter. Mornings on the porch swing, evenings watering the garden, Sundays hiking the ridge line just to feel small in the best kind of way. And every fall we'd trim the hedge along the property line, the same hedge that had grown there since the Eisenhower administration. No HOA, no board members with clipboards, no approved fence colors, just neighbors who minded their business and waved from the mailbox like civilized people. But the first time I walked over to say, "Welcome to the neighborhood," carrying a jar of Martha's peach jam, because that's what you do out here, Betsy didn't greet me with a smile or a hello. She stared at the jar like it was radioactive, like Southern hospitality was some kind of chemical attack. She barely cracked her door, gave me a tight little smile that wasn't a smile, and said, "We prefer to maintain privacy." Privacy? Lady, this isn't Beverly Hills. Privacy here, it means don't shoot my mailbox, and I'll let your dog chase squirrels in peace. I figured, all right, maybe she's just stressed, moving is hard, emotions run high, give it time. Lord, if I had known then. The trouble didn't start big. It never does. It started with a look. I was trimming the hedge one afternoon, humming to myself, sun warm on my shoulders, when suddenly she stormed out of her yard like she'd been waiting in the bushes for her cue. "Excuse me," she snapped, marching straight toward me. Designer sunglasses reflecting my confused face right back at me like I was a problem she'd read about in a manual. "That hedge is on my property." I blinked. "Ma'am, this hedge has been the boundary since long before either of us were born. That's not what my survey says." "Did you look at the county map?" I asked, still polite, still hopeful. She lifted her chin. "I don't need to. I know where my property begins." "Well," I said slowly, "so do I. And it begins right here." Her mouth tightened like someone had tightened a screw in her jaw. She stormed back toward her porch, muttering something about trespassing and documenting incidents, and I just stood there with my hedge trimmers thinking, wow, okay, we're doing this. I walked inside later and told Martha, who didn't even look up from chopping onions. "She's one of those," she said, voice flat. "The kind who argues with church signs and thinks the community Facebook page is a legal court." We laughed it off, because what else do you do when life hands you a cartoon villain? But the knot in my stomach didn't go away. And sure enough, the next week, while I was patching a spot on the fence, she appeared again like she had hedge radar. "You need to stop working on my fence," she declared. "It's mine," I told her calmly. "Built it with my own hands in '09. "No," she snapped. "You think it's yours. But your fence is encroaching." Encroaching? Lord help me. Suddenly, I was living next to Napoleon in yoga pants. I tried humor. "If it's on your land, feel free to stain it sometime." She didn't laugh. Not even a hint of humanity. Just turned and marched off like she was filing mental paperwork. At first, I tried to let it go. Life's too short to argue with fools, and my tomatoes were coming in beautifully, and that felt more important. But then came Saturday morning. Good weather, birds singing, Martha baking biscuits inside, and I'm out there patching fence boards, hands covered in sawdust, feeling proud of a life built simple and honest, and she barrels across that yard like a suburban linebacker. "This is your final warning," she announced. "Stop trespassing on my land." I put my hammer down, slow, took a deep breath, and said, "Betsy, this is my land. That fence, that hedge, that oak tree, they've marked this boundary for decades. You can check every record in the county. She raised her phone like she was recording evidence for Law and Order, Delusion Unit. I will be reporting this. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't stoop to the chaos she was drowning in. I simply said, do what you need to do, but stop harassing me. She stomped off again, and I looked at the sky like maybe God would offer clarity, but all I got was a squirrel judging us from the oak tree like he was embarrassed to live near humanity. I told myself it would blow over. I was wrong. See, there are moments in life when you don't realize you're walking into a storm until lightning cracks over your head. And for me, that moment came 2 days later. Hedge clippers in hand, sun shining, peace restored, until Betsy came out again, this time screaming like the hedge insulted her ancestors. You're damaging my property, she shrieked. I'm trimming my hedge, I said, steady. That shrub line is mine. She said it with the same tone people use to announce court rulings. I put the clippers down. I walked inside. I called the county. They told me, politely, that she was wrong. But she didn't want truth. She wanted power. And power without reality? That's just madness with a clipboard. The day she called the cops on me for trimming that hedge, that's when everything changed. Because sometimes you don't choose a fight chooses your driveway. When the patrol truck rolled slowly up my gravel drive, tires crunching like they were chewing on the piece I had left, I remember thinking, this can't be real. Surely no sane officer drove all the way out here because a hedge offended somebody's ego. But there he was, stepping out into the morning sun, hand resting casually on his belt, expression somewhere between bored and mildly curious. Morning, he said. Morning, I replied. Before he could say another word, here she came. Betsy, marching across her yard like she'd been waiting behind a curtain for her cue, arms swinging, hair shaking, rage powering each step like gasoline poured straight on a spark. Officer, thank God you're here, she cried, like she had just escaped a hostage crisis instead of watching me trim greenery. She pointed at me with all the grace of someone throwing blame like darts in the dark. He's trespassing, destroying my property, and he threatened me. I blinked. I did what now? The officer turned to me, trying not to sigh. Sir, I'm trimming the hedge, I said, gesturing to the trimmers, to the hedge, to reality itself, which apparently needed representation today. My hedge. On my line. Same hedge I've trimmed for 15 years. It's mine, Betsy snapped, crossing her arms so hard she folded her whole personality into it. And he's damaging it intentionally. Then she glared at me, eyes sharp and shiny like anger-polished marbles. I want him cited, removed from my property, and I want documentation for court. The officer stepped closer to the hedge, squinted at it like maybe property lines were written in the leaves. Ma'am, this hedge looks like it's been here a long time. It's still mine, she hissed, like tenure was irrelevant in the kingdom of delusion. He looked back at her, patience thinning. Do you have property documents showing this? I don't need documents, she snapped. I know my land. That's when the officer's face did this thing, tiny little twitch at the corner of his eye, like his brain whispered, Lord, give me strength. He turned to me. Sir, do you have your deed handy? I sure do. I walked inside, grabbed the file I'd pulled from the drawer the moment she started yelling earlier that week. You don't build a life in the country without learning to keep paperwork handy, right next to the duct tape and common sense. I brought it out, opened it on the hood of his cruiser like we were signing a peace treaty. He looked it over, nodded, pointed at the map. Yep, that hedge is yours. It's right on the line. Then he turned to Betsy, voice calm but heavy with finality. Ma'am, he's not trespassing. He's maintaining his property. Silence. You ever watch someone lose a chess match they didn't know they were playing? That was the moment. Her lips pressed together so tight they looked like they were trying to escape her face. I don't accept that, she whispered. The officer looked at her like he was mentally filing paperwork too, the kind labeled problem resident. Ma'am, you don't get to accept or reject property lines. I swear a squirrel paused mid-acorn chew to watch this unfold. She pointed her finger again, straight at me, trembling now, like frustration had nowhere left to go. This isn't over. I'll be pursuing legal action. And then she stomped away, heels sinking into soft ground, nearly twisting her ankle, which frankly would have been poetic. The officer shook his head, gave me a sympathetic look. Some folks just look for fights, he said. Call us if she escalates. Escalate. Funny word. At that moment I thought, what more could she even do? Life has a way of answering questions you should have never asked. Because 2 mornings later, I walked outside to the sight of branches, not trimmed, not shaped, hacked off and lying in brutal piles like someone tried to punish the hedge for existing. Half the greenery was butchered, raw wood exposed like open wounds running along the line. And there she was, in her yard, holding garden shears like a weapon, face smug, chin high. "What did you do?" I asked, stunned, anger rising slow like a storm building in heat. "I cleaned up my hedge," she said, voice dripping victory like she'd conquered a small nation. "That's vandalism," I said quietly, trying not to explode. "No," she snapped. "That's me correcting damage you caused." I felt something hot push into my chest. Not just anger, something deeper, heavier. The injustice of watching years of quiet care be shredded by someone who hated what she didn't understand. "You need to step away from the hedge," I said, voice tight. She smirked. "Make me. I don't yell. I don't fight neighbors. I don't let chaos win." So I walked back inside, grabbed my phone, dialed the sheriff, and said the words I never thought I'd say. "My neighbor is destroying my property. I need a report filed." They came. They took photos. They asked her to stop. She told them she was reclaiming stolen land. They stared at her like she was confessing to dreaming in conspiracy theories. When they left, Martha put her hands on my shoulders, squeezing gently, grounding me. "We're not fighting anger with anger," she whispered. "We're doing this right." So we did. I documented every cut branch, every text, every witness, every moment she marched to the edge of the property just to glare like she was trying to set me on fire with unresolved childhood drama. I ordered a certified survey, not because I needed proof, but because I wanted evidence in case she decided to swing those shears at more than shrubbery. I printed maps, county plats, deed references. I even labeled a binder, property incidents, Langford case. And there's a strange kind of sadness in that. The moment you realize your peace requires paperwork, your land requires defense, your simple life requires strategy. Then one evening, right around golden hour, I heard shouting from her yard, furious, frantic, like someone arguing with ghosts. I walked outside and saw her pacing, phone in hand, screaming into it. "He's not going to win. I will not be pushed out. This is MY land." And that was when it hit me. She wasn't just mean or controlling or rude. She was obsessed. She wasn't defending land. She was defending pride, ego, identity. And nothing is more dangerous than someone fighting a war that exists only in their head. The next morning, an envelope sat wedged in my fence. No stamp, no return address, just my last name written in shaky pen strokes. Inside, "Cease your illegal occupation or face legal consequences." Illegal occupation. Of my own property. I stood there, holding the letter, birds chirping peacefully around me like nature was mocking the insanity of human ego. And for the first time since this started, I felt tired. Not scared, not angry, just tired of fighting a battle I didn't ask for. But peace doesn't protect itself. And I wasn't going to be bullied off the land I'd built a life on. Sometimes you don't go looking for war. War knocks on your door holding hedge clippers and shaky handwriting. So I took a breath, looked at my land, at my porch, at the life I carved here, and made a quiet promise to myself. If she wants a fight, I'll give her one, but it'll be the kind fought in courtrooms and paperwork and truth, not in yelling matches across the yard. The storm was here. I wasn't running. Not 1 inch. If part 1 of this nightmare was confusion and part 2 was chaos, then part 3, well, that was the reckoning. And let me tell you, reckoning doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes in the form of a clipboard, a badge, and a man who looks like he spent 30 years dealing with people who suddenly discover they don't understand property law. The county survey crew rolled in on a Tuesday morning, trucks rumbling up the gravel driveway like a promise I'd been waiting on for months. Bright vests, steel-tipped boots, GPS poles pointed toward the sky, calm professionalism that no amount of neighborly delusion could shake. They didn't knock. They didn't ask permission. They just got to work, and I swear, watching those little markers go in the earth felt like watching truth being hammered into reality. And there was Betsy, standing at her fence line, arms crossed so tight it looked like she was trying to hold her spine in, eyes wide, jaw clenched. She looked like someone who thought she had the last move on the chessboard, and suddenly realized she didn't even understand the rules. "What are they doing?" she snapped, marching toward me like she had legal authority and main character energy all rolled into one very loud package. Survey? I said simply. You can't do that. I shrugged. County says I can. She sputtered. Literally sputtered. It was like watching a tea kettle try to curse. That's harassment, she hissed. And I'll sue. You said that before. I replied, calm as pond water. Maybe this time bring a map. She stormed off, muttering something about corruption and conspiracies and not on my watch, which, honestly, felt dramatic for someone armed with hedge clippers and spite. By noon, the survey team had finished. They packed up, nodded politely, and handed me a freshly printed map with bright orange flags marking each boundary point, like little glowing truths in the dirt. The hedgerow, the one she butchered? Mine. Fully. Indisputably. Legally. But then came the twist no one, not even I, expected. Turns out boundaries run both ways. The surveyor tapped a point on the map, then pointed out toward Betsy's backyard. That shed, he said matter-of-factly, is 3 feet over your property line. I blinked. The one she keeps lawn chemicals in. Yep. And her firewood racks. Also yours. And her chicken coop? He nodded. Trespassing structures. Unpermitted. Civil case if you want. There it was. Not vengeance. Not rage. Just truth sitting quiet and heavy in my hands, like a loaded choice. You want to take it down? The surveyor asked. I didn't answer yet. I just stared out at her yard, at the sun glinting off the little roof of that coop, at the chickens scratching peacefully like they didn't know they lived in the middle of a boundary war. Funny thing about country life, you learn what matters and what doesn't. Fences matter. Land matters. Peace matters. Chickens? Chickens never asked for any of this. But consequences matter too. That afternoon, I filed the paperwork, not out of anger, not out of pettiness, just necessity. Someone who weaponizes false claims needs to learn that the law is sharper than their voice. The sheriff served her notice the next morning, and I watched from my porch as Betsy stood in her yard holding that paper, face pale, fingers shaking like the words on the page burned. She marched toward me once more, fury rising like heat on asphalt. How dare you? No. I cut in, voice low, steady, almost gentle. How dare you? She froze. You cut my hedge. You called the cops. You accused me of theft, of trespassing, of crimes you made up in your head. And now the law says your shed is on my land. I didn't do that. You did. You crossed a line, literally and legally. Silence. The kind that hits like a hammer, ringing in the air. Her eyes darted, searching for footing that didn't exist. You could have talked to me. I tried, I said quietly. You yelled. You threatened. You doubled down. So now the law talks for me. Her shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in realization. The storm she summoned finally came home to roost. And for the first time since she moved in, she looked human. Small. Lost. Like maybe the battlefield she created only ever existed inside her own fear. She didn't apologize. People like her don't. But she nodded once, stiff, pained, and walked back to her house like each step weighed a lifetime. Within 2 weeks, the shed was gone. The coop moved. The firewood lifted and stacked on her side, though it leaned like her pride did. The hedge? It grew back slowly, rough at first, uneven, but strong, each branch a reminder that things heal when you stop cutting at them. And the day she sold her house, for sale signs sticking crooked in the lawn like even the post didn't want to stay. I stood on my porch, coffee warm in my hand, and watched her car roll down the road, taillights shrinking into distance. No cheers. No triumphal music. Just a long, deep exhale. Winning isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just quiet mornings again, trimming hedges without fear, waving to new neighbors who simply say hi and mean it. Sometimes winning is peace returning like an old friend who knew you'd eventually get back to yourself. And yeah, people ask if I regret filing, if I could have let it go, if I escalated. But here's what I learned. You can forgive someone without letting them keep the keys to your peace. You can be kind and still enforce boundaries, property or personal. You can stand quiet until quiet isn't enough. And when someone tries to steal your space, your land, your dignity, your right to live in peace, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand firm and say, not 1 inch. So here we are, a hedge regrown, a boundary respected, a life reclaimed, and a lesson, One that tastes a little like justice and a little like early morning coffee on fresh-cut grass. Some neighbors teach you patience. Some teach you to laugh. And some teach you to document everything. Now I gotta ask you, because stories like this live in every town, every neighborhood, every HOA and country road and quiet street in America. Backhand index pointing right. Have you ever dealt with a neighbor who thought your property was theirs? Backhand index pointing right. Did you fight back? Or did you walk away? Backhand index pointing right. And do you think I handled this right? Or should I have taken a different path? Drop your thoughts, your stories, your battles won or lost. Because I swear, sometimes the wildest HOA dramas don't happen in HOAs at all. And hey, hit that like button if you think surveys save sanity. Subscribe if you believe boundaries matter. And share this with someone who loves a good neighbor from hell redemption arc. Thanks for listening. See you in the next one.